Hello. Welcome to ATC Office Hours. We're starting this one about 40 minutes after we intended to, and I'm not sure if this actually streams out to people, but we'll find out and we'll get some feedback on that. We had some audio difficulties, so we were looking at each other from where I am in Japan to where Mads and Thomas and Martin are in Denmark. Finally, we got it sorted out, so we're going to go ahead and get started and talk about pesticide-free turf management. Welcome to the show, Mads Andersen, Thomas Pihl, and Martin Nilsson.
Thank you, Micah. Thank you very much.
So I've had the pleasure of knowing you fine gentlemen for many years now, but I think some of the people watching or listening to this won't know exactly who we all are. So let me try to introduce everybody. I'll arrange the screen so we get the right people in the right places, and I'll put up a nice caption to show your names. Let's start off with you, Mads. Can you give a quick intro of what you do?
Yes, my name is Mads Andersen. I'm a course manager at the Solrød Golf Club, which is like the other courses right next to Copenhagen, like 20 minutes north of Copenhagen. The golf course is placed in a protected nature park with a lot of restrictions. So that's probably one of the main reasons I'm sitting here right now, due to pesticide-free use.
And we've got on the same camera, we've got first Thomas Pihl, the golf course manager at Footiso Golf Club. And the main topic that I want to talk about for the next hour or so is how you presented the DP World Tour event, the Danish Golf Championship, on a pesticide-free golf course. So I've got some pictures that we can show, and we'll talk about the stress of that and how it can be so successful. But can you tell us how long you've been working at Footiso and give a quick introduction, Thomas?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my name is Thomas. I'm the course manager here at Footiso Golf Club. I've been here for about 22 years now. It's a 27-hole golf course located just north of Copenhagen. It's protected land and pesticide-free. That's it.
All right. And then sitting next to him, Martin Nilsson, Vice Chairman of FEGA, the Federation of European Golf Greenkeeper Associations. Can you also give a quick intro, Martin?
Yes, I can. And probably the normal title for me would be head greenkeeper at Royal Copenhagen Golf Club. But I was, let's say, fired or made redundant this last Thursday. So I'm actually not a Copenhagener anymore. But until very recently, I've taken care of this wonderful golf course for nearly 20 years. 1st of January, that's my 20th anniversary. And it is like my colleagues here, it's a heavily restricted parkland golf course, 1,400 hectares. It's the oldest golf club in Denmark, actually, Scandinavia. We have been pesticide-free since 2011. And then we have an extra bonus out there. We have more than 2,000 deer living and enjoying life on the golf course and in the park.
Thank you, everyone. So on this ATC Office Hours, I want to give an overview of what I experienced last August when I went to see the Danish Golf Championship at Footiso Golf Club. So we were all working there that week, and I've got some pictures. Let's see. Are you guys seeing this on your screen?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
All right. So how many total people were there, Thomas?
That differs a little bit from day to day, but approximately 45 normal staff and volunteers. So around 45 people in total.
From many different countries, mostly, well, Europe was well represented, but also Australia, USA, Scotland, England.
Yeah, it was lovely to see that many people and all the different countries represented. So it was fantastic.
And I'm gonna just scroll through here with a few images showing grass that looks really good. And to me, it's just astounding to have these kind of surfaces and have it be pesticide free. And the greens were cut at 4 millimeters during the tournament week, and they were cut with Baroness mowers. And I calculated the Smith Kearns dollar spot risk index had been above that 20% threshold, which is kind of a standard value for when you could consider you're at risk of having dollar spot symptoms or having a dollar spot epidemic. And something like 35 out of the previous 50 days or 27 out of the previous 40 days leading up to the tournament, something like that. That's the number of days at which the Smith Kearns dollar spot index was greater than 20%. During the tournament week, there was lots of dew in the morning and there was some low ground fog, plenty of humidity, and the temperatures were at a very good level for dollar spot. So I know that was quite a bit of stress for you, Thomas, as you got ready for the tournament.
Yes, that's correct. The dollar spot is something we don't have too much experience with in Denmark yet. It's just been in and around in Denmark for about 10 years. And not having that tool, being able to use chemicals, then it does take a bit more time to figure out what to actually do about it when you see a problem. Our main issues for many years have been snow mold in the wintertime, and we have worked with that, and I think we have found some good practical methods to deal with that. But dollar spot it's a bit more tricky, and obviously also in the playing season more due to the snow mold. So yeah, that was a bit stressful going under the tournament. I was not too concerned, to be honest, regarding dollar spot. Being out very early in the morning and with all the volunteers, and we could do stuff, but going into the tournament the month before, it was probably some of the more stressful ones. Yeah.
And in the month leading up to the tournament, there was plenty of high risk days for dollar spot. So what were some of, so you knew you haven't applied fungicides there for 5 years or so. And then prior to that, you'd applied one fungicide per year for 3 years, and then going back again another 7 years or something like that. It was completely fungicide and pesticide free. So on this site with no pesticides for a few years, and you knew that you couldn't apply pesticides through the summer, what strategies were you using leading up to the tournament to try to minimize dollar spot and other diseases and insects and so on?
It's not just one thing. I think with the chemical, you just have that single tool. But if you don't, you need to work more holistic and approaches from different sides. And maybe removing dew could help you 20% keeping a dry surface, choosing the right grasses and stuff like that can give you some percentages in better and a better chance to survive, more or less. And as you saw when you were here, Mike, it was not completely disease free, and we were very well aware of that. And DP Wolsø and their agronomists were also aware of that, and was something that we discussed how to approach it. But in say the basic greenkeeping is I think probably is the key to most of it. Having control of how your soil is performing, thatch layer and stuff like that is everything that we know. Everyone is the basic things that you need to have control of, more or less.
Martin, you were changing hole locations in the mornings during the tournament, and I think you were doing 9 of the holes. So you were you doing the first 9 holes, 1 to 9?
I was doing the first 9, yes.
And did you ever have a situation where the hole location needed to be adjusted, or the tournament officials could not use a hole location that they wanted to due to disease issues on the green? Was that ever an issue?
That was never an issue. I think all the greens looked great. There was one episode where we needed to change a hole the night before because we've actually picked a spot that has been used during practice rounds. So we needed to change it, and that was fun. But surface-wise, there wasn't any sort of a considerations that it looks too poorly here, or how will it look in the television or anything. These were very good and healthy greens. And so this was just a matter of finding the best spot for the play so they can be challenged.
And I'm kind of asking leading questions because I think I knew that answer, because I was out there, I was collecting data on the green, so I was going around looking for flattish spots to try to make stimp meter measurements, and I was going around with my Clegg hammer measuring different sections of the greens for firmness, and eventually I got across all the greens on the course over the course of the week. Some of the greens I measured repeatedly again and again to check how they changed over time, but I took measurements from all the greens on the course, and I just didn't see much disease. And I'll ask you a leading question, Mads. You were leading some of the greens mowing teams, and I know that in the afternoon mows when the greens were dry, it was pretty hard to see the lines, wasn't it?
It was pretty much impossible, depending on direction, of course. But yeah.
So when you're doing that, sometimes you might pick a ball mark, or you might pick a tree at the other end of the green, or a weed in the rough, or some blemish somewhere beyond the green to kind of mark like what your aiming point would be. And it would be really helpful if there were disease scars or something on the green that you could use to, like, oh, I've just gone over this one, so now my next line needs to be shifted over from that. Did you ever have the case where you could utilize that kind of technique?
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, because the greens are too perfect.
They were pretty much perfect. Of course, there's nothing like perfection in our business, but still, it was pretty close to being perfect. Yes. Of course, we are doing a lot of cutting, even though it was fescue greens. It was still a lot of cut, a lot of roll. So of course, it was very little clippings, and that makes it more difficult to see where you're walking. But no, it was really astonishing surfaces. Also considering Thomas's staff, not during the week, but the year ahead, very limited staff in order to put such a big event together. So hats off to Thomas for that.
Do you think, So the reason why these courses, so let's say, what's the situation in Denmark with the total number of courses, and then how many courses are using no pesticides at all?
I think there is just around 200 golf courses in Denmark, maybe 180. And what is registered with the Danish Golf Federation is there's around 20 golf courses that is not applying any pesticides. There is some sort of a confusion in this because it's also it's voluntary. It's free if you want to submit data. So you're actually pesticide free now if you don't submit data to the federation. But little by little, more and more golf clubs are in this situation because either they're on government land, lending the land for a golf course, or they are, for example, on municipality land where you could have a situation where you have a groundwater reserve underneath, and then there's rules against this as well. So it's little by little, it's more, but it's heavily restricted already.
So if I was a course that was not restricted, if I was on private land and no restrictions on pesticides, but the golf course is located in Denmark, are there still limitations in which products can be applied and how many applications can be made per year?
Yeah, we have a sort of a load index that sort of decides how much, for example, the fungicide we can apply, or how much herbicides, insecticides are out, for example, and PGRs is also out by now. But if we just take the fungicides, it is like today in this system, you have room for 2 applications against dollar spot, and then you have 2 products against snow mold. So you can make 2 applications of one product and then 1 application of another one. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas and Mads. But that's just like, it's not on the label of the products. And it's also, there are very few products that are registered in Denmark and are allowed. And then on top of this, this system, this load index also decides how many applications you can do. And if you do too many, you will turn red, and then you will get a letter from the EPA or the Federation.
So and how are herbicides added into that load index?
It is, but it's a separate column. So if you use, for example, less herbicides 1 year, you cannot add it on top of let's say, then we use a little bit more fungicide. So the product lines are separated.
But you can actually go in and do calculations, like on herbicides. So you choose a product and you do a calculation. I have this area size, and it'll tell you how much area you can actually cover until you have used your limit. And that can easily be, you can't spray the whole course, that you have to say, my area is I can only spray 6 fairways for herbicides, and then my limit is used, and you have to wait for the next year, and you can maybe spray 6 other fairways. So that's how it works for herbicides. And if you choose a different product, you can maybe do less area or more area depending on how toxic the product is. But you can only choose from the list that's approved, and you have to do calculations, and you also, of course, have to do all kinds of registrations of what products you used, how much, what day, and you have to keep records, of course. Yes.
I think the non-pesticide golf courses in Denmark are either at the leading edge or are close to the leading edge globally in terms of managing golf facilities with no pesticides. Because I know you're not the only people in the world. There's people in other countries that are managing without pesticides, but it seems like outside of Europe, it seems to me a bit of a novelty. It would be quite rare. Within Europe, I suppose, like in the Netherlands, I don't think there must be some pesticide-free courses there. In Sweden, I know there's an organic golf course. and in Norway there's probably some pesticide-free. But as far as like having a cluster of golf courses that are pesticide-free, is Denmark one of the leading ones, or do you know other hot spots around the world?
So, not around the world. I know half of Belgium is pesticide-free. You have Wallonia, where the regional government decided almost overnight that no pesticides is going to be allowed on the golf courses. So I guess it's only a few years back, but I think they're moving forward pretty fast right now in terms of being leading edge, because that's all the golf courses in Wallonia. And we are reaching out. That's another topic for today. I think we need more talk about Furesø, but this experience group we have in Denmark, and we are sharing our experiences with a Dutch group and a Swedish group and a German. But we want to reach out to the Belgians to see, hey, can we learn from you, and can you learn from us, because we are in the same boat. And I think that's the most important thing, to share knowledge.
And it seems to me that this trend goes in one direction. So it's more likely that more places around the world will see more and more restrictions on pesticides, rather than there being more and more fondness from the governments or fondness from the golfing public to increase the amount of pesticide use on golf courses. So it seems to me that what you guys are learning, and as you mentioned, the strategies that you've developed through the experience group and the process of sharing experiences and finding what works and what doesn't, seems like something that we really should make more widely known, which is why I want to have this call. So let's look at a few more pictures from the tournament. Let's see. I think I put in here the absolute worst dollar spot. Thomas, this is from in the tournament. This was the 14th green, the tournament 14th, and there's a patch in there of the really coarse type of bent grass, but that's one that has a naturally resistant type of characteristic to the dollar spot. And so you've got, so we're looking at a patch of bent grass in a velvet bent base with fine fescue dominated sward. And then the next image, Thomas, will be on the same green and one of the very susceptible varieties. And that next image that I'll show was the absolute worst, or let's say the most concentrated amount of dollar spot that I saw on any of the greens, which is here.
So yeah, that would be a typical picture that we see where the fescue and velvet bent mix is not affected, but where we have the coarser bent grasses, probably creeping bent, being taken in with the golf shoes from the rough. I suspect that is very susceptible to dollar spot. So you see when we get dollar spot, it's very often in those spots.
And yeah, so in that case, you might try to sod that out. You could just sod that out, right? And try to replace it with a grass that's going to be more resistant.
We are trying to. We are also trying to overseed these spots, so it's more of a floating transition to what we would call the better grasses. But we have definitely seen, we have 27 holes, and 18 of the holes are seeded with fescue and velvet bent, and the other 9 are seeded with fescue and brown top bent. And we see a lot more dollar spot coming into the fescue brown top bent compared to the 18 with the velvet bend mix. So I think a lot of it, and I think in general with diseases and other pests, it's we can gain a lot from just choosing the right grasses, the right species, the right varieties, because there's quite a big difference even between the different varieties of fescue or bends.
This was the tournament 8th green, and I believe this is the tournament 8th green, and this was a typical appearance, which is during the tournament week, which is it looks just like a green that had been treated with pesticides, with pesticides that would have prevented any disease, and I was just so impressed by that. So Thomas, you've mentioned many times about the fundamental green keeping, and when we did an interview on video there at the tournament, and that's a video that's up on my YouTube channel, we talked about this a little bit, and you mentioned it earlier in this discussion, and then you just talked about choosing the right kind of grasses or the right varieties of grasses. And I guess if you could like list in when you try to organize in your mind what some of the fundamental greenkeeping practices are, could you give us like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6? And I'm thinking of things like mow at the proper height, mow with sharp mowers, irrigate the right amount. What do you think are the important fundamental greenkeeping practices in your location to be successful, knowing you have to deal with winter diseases and keep POA out and summer diseases? Do you ever like organize it into like a set of things that you can list?
I think it really starts with the basic with the soil and the conditions there. I'm thinking back to about 2000, where some of 9 of our green were completely reconstructed. We could see where it was which way it was going. Already there was talks about no chemicals available in the future and stuff, and then we started to make a strategy. What can we do to make us in a stronger position to withstand any disease, whether it's a summer or winter disease. We had old push-up greens full of POA, and already there was some decision made starting to make better conditions to grow better grasses that could survive or give us a better chance to survive. I think it's fair to say that we are definitely not disease-free, but if we can keep it on a level where we can still host a fairly big tournament and where we can keep our members happy enough, then I can live with a little bit of spots here and there. But yeah, basic the build up, and I don't think we are there yet. We are still experimenting with that. We've just made a new chipping green on a driving range. It's a USDA spec built green, but instead of having 30 centimeters of root zone mix, we have 40. We have seen that we can keep the surface drier. That makes sense, of course, but that favor the fescue mix compared to other grasses. So
let me ask a question. You said it's a USGA mix or a USGA green, but by that you mean the particle size distribution of the root zone material meets the USGA recommendations.
Yes, and the drainage layer and with the drain pipe underneath. So we have this drainage layer, and then a normal spec would be 30 centimeter of root zone mix on top of that. So that's where we have added a bit more. We have some greens on the course. Must be in the good days where there was a lot of money in the club, where there was added 40-45 centimeter of root zone mix, and they are working far better than those with 30 centimeter of root zone mix. And asking what else, I think measuring and knowing your organic matter content in the top of the surface. We can always discuss which depth to take. We normally do the top 2 centimeters. That's where I've found the most important, but there's good arguments for doing other measurements as well regarding that. But knowing that is really important. And we try to, our target is around 3.5% in the top 2. And that's where we would normally be. In some years a little higher, 4.5, but normally around 3.5, I would say.
And is that using the method at ETL, or is that using a different method for measuring the organic matter?
That's ETL, yeah.
So you've talked about the importance of the soil, and you've mentioned wanting to keep the organic matter from getting too high, and you find the fescue does better when it's drier. So the greens that have a deeper root zone mix will have a drier, a lower water content near the surface in that deeper root zone. So that helps you grow the grasses that you want to grow. And
that will, of course, differ from area to area. It's not it's probably not the same in Japan or in the States, but I think it's also about finding what is working for you in your area. We are all different and different locations, but and growing different types of grasses. So it's about finding what works for you, and that's why I said early on that if you don't have that chemical to use, it will take you a bit longer time to figure out exactly what is working better for a specific disease.
I'm going to go back to my slideshow and let's look at a few more pictures from the tournament, and then let's talk about then we'll talk about the experience group. I really like this picture. This was from the tournament 6th hole, looking up the fairway. Am I right? Do I remember correctly that you don't have fairway irrigation there either?
No, that's correct. We are very restricted on irrigation water, so we are only allowed to irrigate greens and tees.
It's quite uncommon in Denmark to have fairway irrigation.
So this was the 2025 season just happened to have timely rainfall at this location. Combined,
we were quite lucky in that perspective, but we have also done quite a lot of work with fairways over the years. If we went 15 years back, the fairways was not looking near what we saw. That it was very coarse ryegrasses and a lot of worm cast. So we've been top dressing with fairly coarse sand, and we have overseeded with the grasses that we have found to be most drought resistant.
Was that hard fescue? What?
Hard fescue and some selected types of ryegrass. Not necessarily the most fine-leaved. That seems to be less drought resistant compared to those with a little bit broader leaf, but still good enough for fairway. So that's we have been overseeding with those specific types for 5-6 years now, and
What do you do
it
for?
definitely helps.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it definitely helps, and then with a combination of some wetting agent program that most summer does the trick for us.
Why are there so few weeds in the fairways?
That's a good question. Well, it's all about competition. So trying to have a dense turf in this specific area. I don't think we have so much contaminating weeds from the outside areas. They are farmlands to the left, and it's not so much contamination in that specific area. We can find areas on the course where we do see more weed, but it for us it's mainly a matter of competition between the grass and the weed. But it was a fairly big concern. There's loads of clover in the cut rough, and there was a big discussion going into the tournament. Now we ended up with a good growth. Martin and I had a course walk about a month before the tournament, and there was just a lot of clover all over. And we were talking with DP World Tour, the agronomist, about how to present it, whether we should cut it high, as they normally would like the cut rough to be more. So it makes the course a little more difficult, or whether we should cut it low if we had dry conditions or we couldn't control the weed, then we would cut it lower and let it play a bit more like a links course. So it was definitely a discussion how to handle weeds if we had different conditions.
Mads, you also don't do herbicide on fairways, do you?
No. Actually, the course hasn't been used herbicides for, I don't know, way before my time. I've been here 7 years, but yeah, probably the last 20 years at least.
And what do you see in terms of if you would say, like, take your fairways and say if you've got 100% grass, or is it 95% grass and 5% weeds, or 50-50? How would you break down your fairways on average?
On an average, I would say if you have 5% of weeds, that's still a lot. If you take the area wise, yeah, I think it's difficult to say. It also depends on what kind of weed it is. Like Thomas said, it really depends on season. If we have good growth, it's pretty good cover, and you don't see the weeds. You don't get. I mean, for me, it's all about what the members actually telling me back. How does the course play? Is it something that's affecting play? Yes or no? And I mean, we see weeds. It's more visible when it's dry, of course. But when you have like a decent growth, I never get complaints from members. It's not something they talk about. Of course, they're used to weeds, but playing wise, it's not an issue. We also had this year a third level pro tour. It was from the pros. There was nobody talked about weeds on fairways or anything. So for me, that's the least concern about weeds. We do cut low due to weeds, especially in the semi-rough areas compared to other courses. We normally cut in like 32 or 38 mil. That's the highest cut we have. And that's mainly because if we let it grow like the cover, like Thomas said, will become an issue, and you will in some parts of the season have lost balls. So we do need to cut it fairly low, but the members like it.
We've talked about like disease on greens, but we haven't talked about disease on fairways. What do you see for disease on fairways, or is it just a non-issue on grass that's that high and that's that sparse? Because I think there's something about the leaves being close together that holds the moisture and allows disease to develop, and maybe that just doesn't happen so much on fairways.
I don't really see any diseases on fairways like that should concern me playing wise. Of course, you get in dry periods, you get some fairy rings, but then again, I mean, for my members, it's more a cosmetic thing than it is a playing thing. It doesn't have to be perfect to be able to play decent. And it's not like my members doesn't really care about the course. Like all clubs, they really do care about the course. But there's a huge difference for me between what I see as a greenkeeper and what they experience when they play golf. And that's one of the benchmarks I use the most, is actually go out and talk to the members while they're playing and ask them, how does the green feel? How's the fairways are playing? And just get a quick response. And that's probably the best feedback you can ever get, because I think most greenkeepers would like to have perfect areas all over the course. But I think over the years I've learned that it's not actually necessary, and that's probably all we can get away with doing pesticide-free, because it's not perfect in any means. But we still have a lot of members, and we still have members paying their annual fee, and they like our course. So
we've got a few comments. Let's take a break and answer a couple of comments or respond to a couple of comments and questions, and then let's get back to our discussion. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. How do we do this? Yeah. So here's a comment from Dr. Stimulant in the UK. He said they don't see dollar spot on brown top bent at their course, which is it's a links course in the northeast of England. And actually in the United States, I have the understanding that brown top bent, or as they call it in America, colonial bent grass, tends to have less dollar spot than creeping bent grass. And what do you guys have to say about that?
I think we agree. We have this, if we, let's say, a sustainability ladder, or we rate the grasses. I think then many of us are afraid of creeping bent, and then we sort of are happier with the red fescues that we use on most of our greens, and Thomas use velvet green, velvet bent as well. Many of us also use brown top bents, the new varieties, but some of us is also on very old golf courses, so we have old varieties living there. Sometimes it's also very difficult to see if it's a creeping bent or a brown top bent who is dealing it. But disease-wise, it's like you're happiest with the red fescue, and then you move on to, let's say, the velvet bent. That's special for Thomas, and then the brown tops, and then maybe the creeping bents. But it's not like fescue doesn't get disease. It's actually one of the grasses we see gets diseased first and most, but it just doesn't die from it.
But do you say the fescue gets diseased first, but it doesn't die from it, and it doesn't affect the playability so much?
That was what we saw for many years when we were looking after snow mold, that it could actually happen in September and October, that you could see some of your better greens getting small patches of snow mold on the fescue. And then when you get into December, maybe November, when we have our conferences in November, it was very normal that the course managers start talking about there was a random attack of snow mold back home, so they had to spray. But that's when it hits the poor annual, for example. Dollar spot is new to all of us, so it's a new sort of a thing that we have to learn. But as a general rule, I think we agree that the fescue has the best survivability ability, but it always gets sick.
But I have some data from the tournament, and the quality of the ball roll on the fescue was so good, and that's compared to creeping bentgrass and other tournament measurements that I've made. And there's something about the fescue and the way that the ball rolls on it, even though it may not look the best, the quality of the ball roll is just superb. On the grass issue, I think there is something to what you said, Martin, that sometimes on these older courses, when we have different patches of grass, we can identify it down to the genus, and we know, like, okay, this is definitely a bent grass of some sort. But to say whether it's a colonial or a creeping or something else, it's not something that I know how to do. And it could be that it would be interesting to look at some of the STURF trials, or perhaps STURF trials in the future that would have creeping and brown top and other types of bent grass, and then just look in the summer what happens with dollar spot. And Mads, you interseed with creeping bentgrass sometimes, don't you? So on your site, you're finding that the creeping bentgrass works well.
Yeah, I mean, when I took over the course 7 years ago, there was quite a bit of POA in it. And actually, I used to work for Thomas as a first assistant for many years, so I was used to the fescue. The thing with my course now, it's design-wise, it's very undulated, and a lot of the greens you're playing uphill, and giving my members the firmness that Thomas has on his greens would be very difficult out here. So when I took over the course, I had to make a decision what to overseed with. So I'm both doing, for some seasons, a creeping bent, also to get quicker establishment after disease scars, but also I do put fescue in, and I think I've been overseeding with mostly creeping bent for 4 seasons now. So I think the next couple of seasons I'm going to do more fescue, because I now have a base, and I actually think it works fairly well. The fescue still survives in the creeping bent. So yeah, that's probably my focus now, to shift a little bit of direction and try to put more fescue in the greens now.
Thank you. Let's answer one question from Randy. Randy is in Bulgaria, and he asks, and I think this is directed to Thomas, how do they deal with the moss and algae, lots of trees and shade, as we see from the pictures? So, yeah, do you have moss and algae problems, Thomas?
I wouldn't say a problem, no. We don't see much algae. We have a few greens where we see a little bit. That's mainly due to some drainage issues on those greens. So I guess that would come with how wet the surface will be. We see moss sometimes after the winter. It's a kind of indicator for me as well, saying we are right on the edge. We can't go lower with the fertilizer. So it's giving me a sign of we are actually on the right side, or just on the edge. Don't go lower now. We normally deal with it with a little bit of lawn sand in the spring, and then it disappears very quickly.
For our non UK or for people that don't know what lawn sand is,
Yeah.
that's a type of fertilizer, right?
Yeah, mainly sand and a very small amount of ammonium sulfate and some iron sulfate mixed with sand.
And so that stimulates the grass enough to just kind of grow over and shade out the moss or hide the
Yeah.
moss?
Yeah.
Or is that lawn
And
sand treating the moss directly?
well, there's a burning effect on the moss as well. When it's mixed with the sand, it seems like it kind of scorches the moss a bit more. So it turns brown, black, and the grass starts growing fairly quick and overtake, and gives it a nice green up in the spring. So that's usually the first thing that we do in the spring. That's when we just have a little bit of temperature. That's where we go out and give a little bit of lawn sand for green and green surrounds.
And do you spot treat with that, or do you just broadcast it everywhere?
Yeah. No.
Okay.
No spot treat. No. It's just a kind of general spring fertilizer, and it's mainly sand. It's fairly small amounts of fertilizer in it, but it does work.
And I think both Mads and I will second that. It's like the lawn sand is used in late winter, very early spring, just sort of to maybe deal with the moss if we have it at all, and also just give it a little bit of vigor. The grass, we don't want to feed too much in the early spring because fescue is a slow starter, so it would be counterproductive. But moss and algae we don't really see during the growing season. We see it when you have a green located in a wrong place. For example, you can have drainage issue, you can also have shade issue, and then we in Copenhagen also see very little algae, but moss and some of these more fancy moss you see during the growing season, we don't really see. I haven't seen it for ages in Copenhagen. I don't think it's not an issue we talk about. It's an indicator that you're either on the edge or you're going in the right direction. It's like red thread. That's also like sort of okay, you're doing the right thing.
I'm scrolling through some slides. I made some slides of data too. Thomas, do you mind if I share some of the slides eventually that with those charts that I shared with you during the week of the green speed and the bauble test?
I think that was the main purpose. And again, thanks a lot, Micah, for coming by. I think we both had that same thought that it could be fun to take some measurements on a course like ours, which is not it's not a highly rated course. It's what you would call a very standard normal course. A lot of play by members, and then suddenly having a big tournament to deal with, and also adding this pesticide-free environment. How good could we get that compared to where you have other resources? So I'm absolutely open to share.
Okay, good. So I've got a slide on the screen now that's showing one of the greens. Maybe this was tournament
17.
And that was one of the greens that I took a stimp meter measurement with. But I was every morning after the greens were prepared for play and before the first group, I made measurements on tournament number 3, tournament number 6, and tournament number 18. Remember, this is a 27-hole facility, and it was played as a composite course for the Danish Golf Championship in 2025. So I made measurements when the greens were prepared for play on the same greens on the same spots. So I made little marks with a green marker so that I was always taking the stimp meter measurement on the same line. So I took a stimp meter measurement to measure the green speed on those greens. Actually, 3 measurements on the 3rd green, 3 on the 6th, 3 on the 18th. And I also used my clay hammer to measure the firmness, and I measured the soil water content. And I took some measurements of the temperature and the wind speed and so on. And I measured all the greens over the course of the week, but every day before the first group teed off or reached that green, I took a measurement of how that green was prepared for play. And then I also took a measurement at the end of play, so after the last group, but before any afternoon work was done. And I'm showing on the screen now the morning average bobble test, and this is the average from those same greens. And I'm going to give a presentation about this of almost 1 hour duration next week at the Danish Greenkeepers conference, and I will share those slides once I prepare them. And I'll put those on my website. So for anybody that's interested, you'll be able to see them, and I will do a comparison of what I'm going to talk about right now. But the average bobble test on the tournament days on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday was always above 9 in the morning. It was 9.1 on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and it was 9.3 on Sunday. And I thought that I'd measured that high before, but when I compared it to about 10 other tournaments where I've collected data since the pandemic, so from 2022 up through 2025, and that's when I've started measuring the bobble test, I've never measured numbers that high. So one was a tournament in Spain. One was, there's multiple tournaments, including the U.S. Amateur. So these bobble test scores are slightly higher than what I measured at the U.S. Amateur at Hazeltine on Pen A4 creeping bentgrass in August of 2024. So now these are on a primarily fescue surface with a velvet bentgrass base. And I thought that was really impressive. So Thomas, you've often asked me, how do our pesticide-free greens compare on an international level? And as far as the bobble test goes, this was actually the best that I've ever recorded. So, but people might, but people can say, oh, it's subjective, right? And there's nothing that I can say to defend that because it is my eyes making the measurement. But I trust my eyes, and golfers trust their eyes. And there were absolutely no complaints about the quality of the ball roll. These are legitimately good numbers. So anyway, let's see. Let's look at some of the other numbers that we measured during the week. The firmness. So I use my clay hammer. In this case, a larger number, a higher number is firmer. And in some ways, Thomas, this is out of your hands because it's up to the European Tour and the officials and the agronomists, and they kind of have some say about how they want you to irrigate, or whether they want you to irrigate or whether they don't want you to irrigate, or so on. But this was 100 on Thursday, 103 on Friday, 109 on Saturday, 114 on Sunday morning. So the firmness just went up slightly every day during the tournament, and those are quite good numbers. But it's not like you were deciding whether the grass was healthy. It was supplied with enough water, and so it was fine to let it get a little bit firmer every day, if I recall.
Yeah, that's correct. It was not that we were told to. This is the way we do it, but it was a good, fair discussion every day how to approach next day, and so yeah, I didn't feel that we pushed the greens over the limit, so I was pretty comfortable with this.
And it's quite good. If I put a link to a YouTube video in one of my blog posts about the tournament, and I may grab a screenshot of that and take some still images and show how high the ball was bouncing, because that's kind of a good indication for people who aren't so familiar with exactly what a 109 or 114 Clegghammer measurement means. But that's it's approaching Lynx level firmness once you get up above 110 or so. So I think anywhere from 90 to 110 is a really good number for a parkland type golf course. And then something like 110 up to 140 is what you would have on a Lynx style surface typically. So this is quite good. And if I compare to the measurements that I've gotten on other courses, I didn't have this at the U.S. Amateur. Chris was using the GS3 ball, so I could get those data and try to kind of estimate what that would be with the Clegg. But these numbers are very comparable to what I've measured at major men's and women's professional events. When it's in the 100 to 114 range, that is, it's very, very typical. And so the stimp meter readings during the tournament, during the tournament days, remember, this is mown at 4 millimeters. There were just a couple greens that were 3.5, right? You had, was 16 was mown at 3.5?
3.8, I think it was, and maybe Mads can remember. You were the one mowing that. We were fertilizing a little bit more going into the tournament than we would normally do. That was mainly to deal with any dollar spot, just to have them grow a little bit more. So we had to cut a little bit more than we would normally do to gain speed. Normally it's very, very easy for us to gain speed, and the target was around 10.5 for the European Tour. That's what we aim for. I know the agronomist from DP World Tour also measured the greens and had a little bit higher numbers.
Yeah,
compared to.
Yep. So,
but,
yeah, he was getting maybe 3 or 4 or 5 inches faster than I was.
Yeah.
So maybe from the agronomist's measurements, I suppose they were closer to 11, right?
Yeah. Or above.
Or above. So, and again, these are quite undulating greens. I had to use the half roll on my stimp meter, the 2X roll, on a good many of the measurements, because there was so much undulation on the greens that using the 1X roll, it was just very difficult to find a spot that was flat enough to get an accurate measurement. So this is like just the right speed. And keep in mind, this is at 4 millimeters, and in American units, I think that's 0.157 inches. It's something like that. So I know a lot of people are mowing at much closer to 2 millimeters than they are to 4 millimeters. So I think this is like, it's just the right speed for the tournament. And it was just the right speed for those greens during the tournament, matched with that firmness level that by Sunday was in the Lynx course range of firmness. Randy asks a question here. He said, how many rolls per day during the tournament?
It varied a little bit, 1 to 2 rolls on greens per day. Some days it was both morning and evening, and some it was only in the morning.
So 2 rolls doesn't mean 2 rolls in the morning. 2 rolls means a morning roll and a evening roll.
Yeah.
And let's see. Here's our water content. So I didn't make a chart that lines up the volumetric water content. This is measured with a TDR 350 with a 0 to 7 centimeter rod length. So we're measuring down to 7 centimeters in the root zone. There was some irrigation applied during the week, and on Thursday it was 12%. And if I recall, there wasn't much rain, or there was just hand watering after that, but not a lot of sprinklers. And so the moisture went down 12, 11.8, 10.4. And by Sunday morning, it was 9.3%, which is relatively low, but still, the grass wasn't wilting or anything like that. And then that corresponded to those firmness levels. So as the soil moisture went from 12 to 9, as that went down, the firmness went from 100 up to 114. So that's what happens. That's what we expect. As surface is dry, they get firmer. And that's where it's so important, like you said, Thomas, to keep your organic matter under control right near the surface, because that can allow your surfaces to dry. And it also have the right depth of sand so that you can have a surface that's dry enough so you can achieve that. I'll show how these change through the day. Let's look at the green speed. Let's look at the soil moisture. Yeah, so like for example, we were just looking at, so the morning measurements are in blue and the afternoon measurements are in red. And so it's just like in the morning, it's usually higher, and then because no irrigation is applied during the day, it goes down. So by, and we were losing, a little bit every day. And then if we go back and look at the green speed, so the green speed was going down by about 0.6 to 1 to 0.9, something like that. Except for Saturday. Saturday was a weird day because in the morning my measurement was way too low, and then in the afternoon it actually went up. But generally what happens is in the morning it would be like 10.3 go to 9.7 in the afternoon. On Thursday it was 10.6 in the morning, then it goes down to 9.8 in the afternoon. On Friday it's 10.8 in the morning, goes down to 9.7 in the afternoon. So that's a typical type of dropping from 6 inches to about a foot. I haven't averaged it over the entire week yet, but I've seen it drop less at other places, but that's where they're using a plant growth regulator and they're really starving it of nitrogen. But you were not using a plant growth regulator, and as you said, Thomas, you applied some extra nitrogen because you have to use basic fundamental greenkeeping principles to deal with the risk of dollar spot. And so to get a little bit more resistance to the dollar spot, you wanted to keep your growth up a little bit, and you do that with nitrogen. So, all right, let's, so there's some of the data, and I want to talk about the experience group, like, a little bit. What can people around the world learn about a method that they can use to share what doesn't work, so they can share the failures or share the successes, so that they can learn whether they're trying to solve a a water restriction problem, or whether they're trying to solve a influx of salinity problem, or whether they're trying to solve a new pest such as rabbits or something. Like let's say you've got a problem, and it might be you can't use pesticides anymore, or it might be a new insect, or a new pest, or a water restriction. What is the experience group concept that you guys are all a part of an experience group? And then you've said that you've developed information through this group that's allowed you to get really comfortable with your pink snow mold or fusarium patch management. You're developing information that helps you to be more comfortable dealing with dollar spot. And in my conversations with all three of you, you've been really optimistic that this can work in other parts of the world for other issues, not just the issues that y'all are dealing with.
Definitely. But I think you have to go back a little bit. I think Thomas and Martin would agree that before you can actually get solutions out of an experience group, you need to, first of all, find some good friends, some good colleagues that you like to be around, because that's the base of it, like good friendships. And you need some kind of, I think, at least from my point of view, you need some kind of relationship in order to be able to share your issues or concerns and get the right feedback and get an honest feedback on what you do and your problems. And that takes time. It takes time to develop a good group and get comfortable that you can share. You can also share staff issues or whatever. It doesn't have to be diseases. It can be budget wise or machinery or whatever. But yeah, you need to start somewhere and make it grow, and it takes time, I'd say, for most people. And then I think we agree that you don't want to be too big of a group, because then you start losing some. So I think we're 8 people. Is that correct? And that works for us. That's a good sized group, a lot of experience, but we're not 15 or 20, because that will never work in practice.
And then do you have monthly? I know there's, once you're part of that group, you talk maybe informally, like you just talk among yourselves when you need to. But as far as formal things within the group, would you have a monthly meeting or an annual meeting, or how do you structure it to keep that group doing something? And what are the formal meetings?
Should I answer that one?
There's no formal leadership in this group. We have Thomas.
I've noticed that.
And Thomas, he enjoys life with the spreadsheet, so he's registering all our data when we have the Tour de Fungus. It's just like we call each other, and then when we feel that we miss each other, we say, okay, we need to have a formal meeting. Let's meet at Søllerød or Furesø. Who's buying lunch for us? We have the Tour de Fungus in November, which is coming up in a few weeks' time. And then little by little, we also have a tradition that in June, just before summer holidays starts, and we're really tired of everything at that stage, we meet at a nice Italian restaurant, and then also former members of the experience group are invited, because it's always sort of a cheerful and a good friends, and we miss the older members, the ones who have exited either because they've left the country or they've left the business. But it's just like we stay together, and then on that day it's just fun. But else it's like and it's little by little it's becoming more and more hard, and there's less time during a working day or a working week to prioritize this. But it's really, really important that you prioritize it. we didn't. I think the experience group we have now is a merger between two groups, and there's also some newer members. But it's so important to have sort of a common issue. I think the original group, their issue was to see, okay, how do we make our golf courses pesticide-free? Because there was legislation coming in Denmark, and also the younger group, which Thomas and I formed in the beginning, that was also maybe just more career advancing group. We just want to take our former bosses' jobs. I think that was the plan. But and then it moved on to snow mold, and then that has been the focus for so many years. And then some small stuff, and now we are considering in the group that Tour de Fungus in November should be moved to Tour de Fungus in June or August, because dollar spot is actually a more interesting problem to us. So we want to solve it in the same way as we feel that we solved snow mold over the years.
And Thomas, you told me that you thought that keeping data, making measurements is really important. And that really, naturally, that's something that I like to hear that, because I think that's important too. But, you know, if you rate how bad the dollars or the snow mold was in 2013, and then you rate it again in 2014, that's a way how you can tell if something's working or how you can tell if things are not working. So I think it's more than just meeting to have coffee. You need to have some kind of record so that you can remember, here's what the conditions were, and here's what we did. And then when you check again, then you check, okay, here's what the conditions were, at least for the particular problem of pink snow mold.
Yeah, and I think that's actually the key, that making a record. I remember back when we started this what we call Tour de Fungus, where we try and do measurements that could teach us something about dealing with snow mold. We had quite a few meetings with within the group with other experts, and trying to select what type of data could be interesting, not from day to day, but on long term, to look at and learn from how to deal with snow mold. So I think that was really the beginning of that project, and can be transferred to other issues. I think we really try and look at, what do you think makes the difference here? Is it how we irrigate it? Is the numbers of fertilization? Is it the timing of when and what we are doing on the course? So really try to think of theory. What do we think makes the difference, and try and measure that over time. Now we have about 13 years of data measuring in November, and that's I think we're becoming more and more similar. The greens are looking more and more the same. We're adapting some of the things that other courses are doing. Just an example, it was we were all taught in school that we should deep vertidrain our greens going into the winter, so they could drain, but we could very easily see that doing that we gain more snow mold. So it was so clear to see in the data, those that were vertidraining were getting more snow mold compared to those that wasn't. We could also test. It was not everyone in the group that had restrictions. So some was spraying, some wasn't, and that we could see what was working and what was not working. When we started, there was some fungicide allowed that was actually not doing anything good. So there was absolutely no reason to spray, because it was exact the same result. the courses in between. So I think it just, the data just gave us some information on what to do and not to do, and I'm pretty comfortable we will see the same with dollar spot. We just need to organize that and think through what do we think, which area can we do something about, and what do we think will make a difference, and then start measuring. And of course also grass composition, organic matter content, stuff like that. So some of the basic things, so you can follow how things develop over time.
We have a couple comments here from Der Rosenfreak, who says, love your stuff. Lawn care without fungicides is a must on private areas. That's why I'm here. And notes that dollar spots increases extreme during the last 2 years or 10 years in the north of Germany on my lawn. So the north of Germany is not dissimilar in climate to where you guys are. And yeah, it's definitely, the dollar spot one is really interesting to where when you were growing up, you just didn't even see it. It wasn't, you would just consider there's no dollar spot in our country.
No. So when we were introduced to dollar spot in textbooks in school, but it wasn't an issue to us. It didn't exist in Denmark. When we started focusing on dollar spot as a potential disease in Denmark on our golf courses was from playing with our Dutch friends in their experience group, because when they joined with us on an biannual meeting, initially it was normal to them as well. But then little by little over the years, the main talk for them was dollar spot. So it was like it was moving up from the south of Europe, up from France to the Netherlands. And we said, okay, maybe this could be an issue to us one day. And then when the German group joined, they also had the issue. So this is just a matter of time. And that's what we have seen over the last, we say 3 years, probably 5 years. We have had some really bad outbreaks on golf courses in Denmark in the years where we didn't have a fungicide to combat dollar spot. Now that we have one, I think we're on the second season, if we are correct. And that has really helped our colleagues who can still apply and who is not in a situation where it doesn't, if they're not in a situation where maybe their surfaces or the management is not in balance, in equilibrium. I think it's just it's a new disease that would be part of our management, and it's just difficult when it's many of the traits of the disease is not similar to how you treat snow mold and also how you manage your golf course. So now we just have to be even more smarter and share more knowledge. It'll be fun.
I've got time. It's almost time for me to have a dinner meeting here in Japan. So I've got time to answer a few more questions, and then we'll shut down this call. So anybody who's watching this live, if you want to send in some questions for our esteemed guests, please go ahead and type those in, and we'll try to answer them. Randy from Bulgaria asks, how much sand do they put for the year? And how often do they top dress? What's the annual nitrogen per hectare? Mm-hmm. And do you have any OM246 data right now? I'll answer that one. No, but the samples have been collected and the samples have been dried and we will eventually have OM246 data, and I'll make a nice blog post about that or a report about that, because when I was there in August, I shared some of the data that I collected at Footiso during the Danish Golf Championship. I also went to Sollerød Golf Club. I apologize, I can't pronounce these the same way that the Danish course managers do it. So I collected data there of firmness and green speed and bobble test and so on. I also went to Royal Copenhagen and measured firmness and green speed and so on, and soil water content on one of the greens there. And there were differences between the courses, and I thought it would be really interesting to check what the OM246 difference is also. So that's a project that's underway, but we don't have the data right now. But I'll go ahead and let you guys answer. For the courses that you manage, for the surfaces that you manage, how much sand, how often do you put sand, and what's the nitrogen rate?
Well, I can start. We are measuring quite a lot of things. We are, for some reason, terrible to measure how much sand in ton that we apply every year in Denmark. It's the strategy with sand have changed a little bit for my place at least. We are top dressing more in the beginning of the season, a lot less in the playing season, and more in the end of the year again. But the main sand being applied will be in the beginning of the season, combined with some procoring or what you call it, tining. And the annual N applied is varying a little bit. We have a different type of green buildup on our course. So it varies from 30 kilo N up till about 70 kilo N per year, per hectare.
Matt?
Yeah. Okay. For me, it also varies. When I took over the course, I was doing a lot more trot dressing than I am now. I think in the beginning, the first 3 years, I did around 200 tons, which was quite heavily trot dressing. That was needed. Now I'm probably more around the 100 tons, but including the 4 greens as well. So that's probably around 2 hectares under 100 tons. And like Thomas, are also doing a little bit different practices now. So it's more heavily trot dress in certain parts of the season. In the beginning, when I get growth, up until early summer, and then I don't really top dress that much during the peak, and then again a little bit in the late summer. So I don't do those like every 14 days top dressing. I don't do that anymore. And from a nitrogen point of view, I'm probably the one in the group that uses the most. This year it's 81 kilos of nitrogen in the greens. It's in that range for me. It varies from season to season, but in between 80 and 90 for me. I hope to do a little less, but that's mainly because of the dollar spot concern. I need to be able to grow the greens, maybe a little more growth to withstand the disease pressure.
And in Copenhagen, it's more or less the same thing. We don't unfortunately measure the numbers of tons a hectare a year, but we have been paying too much attention to American scientists living abroad, listening to podcasts. So we are also moving the top dressing to the shoulders of the season. So it's like the spring work and the fall work, and then occasionally one in summer. We have always top dressed our greens when we needed just to sort of a light spread lettuce on a 4-week basis. So it's never on a 2-week basis. But now it's like we're skipping it during summer, and that is simply because is it needed? If the grass is not growing, if the trueness is there, why do we apply the sand? That's what you are trying to sort of communicate to us greenkeepers, Marcus. So why do you do it? Look at the data, look at the performance, and that's what we are paying attention to. Why work if it's not necessary? Why do we punch holes in the greens when they still are functioning, if there's still roots, if the water is still coming through? So why do it? Nitrogen wise, it's also between 30, 40, 50, sometimes 17, but definitely in the low end. Copenhagen greens are push-up greens with the top dressing on top for 20 years. So maybe they're still a little bit fertile, but it's in the low range.
We have a question about iron sulfate. This also from Der Brassenfreak. We often visit Denmark's North Sea coast. I've noticed that the greenkeepers spray the greens with iron sulfate relatively often and relatively heavily. What do you think about this? Is that common in Denmark?
I would say so. I don't know what relatively often and relatively heavily. We try to do it, I think, on a 4-week basis. Now, many of us are changing our regime to a 2-week basis because of the dollar spot and also winter management for snow mold. Normally, it was very much like 4-week basis, but now it's more like a 2-week basis if you can get out, if it's not too soft and wet. And then the small doses, is it 5 kilos a hectare now of sulfate of iron, maybe sometimes 8 or 10. In the old days, it was 20 kilos every 4 weeks. We use it as sort of just to change the pH on the greens as a little sort of a protection against the disease outbreaks. That's how we use it. Not so much for coloring anymore, but when we go to the fall, then we start thinking about more of sulfate of iron because we can't rely on fungicides. It just changes the pH on the greens and makes life more difficult for the snow mold, for example. And that's also what we apply to the dollar spot.
Yeah, it definitely suppresses the dollar spot as well. So iron sulfate can be a nice trick.
But we are not applying sulfate of iron like you do in scientific experiments where you see when do we get an effective treatment with sulfate of iron against, for example, snow mold. Those doses are simply too high. That's just for research.
Okay, so you're applying in small amounts, so you think it has a small effect on the disease, but you're not applying it enough to have a effective fungicide. It does have some type of fungicidal effect, but not like completely shut down the disease. It's not like you're using it as a replacement. Yeah. Okay, we can talk about nitrogen rates a little bit because the question is 30 to 70 kilograms per hectare for fine fescue greens and or bentgrass greens. Yeah, the answer is yes. And the fescue is getting a little bit less. And then Mads, who's also, trying to grow some bentgrass, he's up as high. He's had 81 this year and he's in the 80 to 90 range sometimes. If we translate that, so we're talking 30 to 90, and that is that's like 0.6 pounds per 1,000 square feet for our American friends, up to 1.8 pounds, something like that. In the climate of the Copenhagen area, which is, I can't instantly off the top of my head compare it to exactly how it compares to anywhere in North America. All right, Randy's got another question. Last question from Randy. Typical pH of the root zone. Thank you. Yeah. What kind of pH are you guys getting good success with? Does that even matter?
My irrigation water is quite high. So all my products are trying to lower the pH. Of course, it varies from test to test and how you do your tests, but I think I've seen somewhere around 6.8 from most of my tests, as I recall, like on an average. Some a little bit lower, some a little bit higher, but in that range.
That's the same.
Yeah.
From
Yeah, that's about the same. I think we more or less all are trying to use the acidifying fertilizers, because if not using that, we will be above 7, and irrigation water is typically above 7, 7.23, something like that.
You're using water from the ground. You have a pump that pumps the water up from underground, and the water has a pH that's that high?
For us, it's a little bit of a mix. We pump up, but it's very, very little. Most of it is surface water from lakes.
Wow.
In this part of Denmark, Denmark is built on chalk, so the pH is pretty high in our groundwater reserves.
Wow. I did not realize that.
But it's important when we talk about this pH, because it's like when we had the discussion in the beginning with Thomas, with all these parameters that sort of you build into protecting your greens against dollar spot. And the same thing with the normal management to be successful, that you need to have the growing environment right. It has to be draining the soil, the green. For example, if we're talking about green, shade is an issue. Get rid of the trees. But there are some of these parameters that you can't control. So, but it's not like you will only be successful with growing fescue if you can control pH. It's just one parameter that you might not be able to control for real. But if the other ones are in the range, that changes the competitive advantage on your green, whether you want to maintain creeping bend, one of your warm season grasses, or red fescue. You just have as many parameters right. And then some of them you will never be right, but maybe it's not a critical one. I think it's a combination of many, many parameters that you build into your system, and that makes you successful of growing the grass that you want to grow, but also protect it against diseases. So that's where fertility, irrigation, cutting height, how many times do you punch holes, how many times do all these things that we know as a greenkeeper, but it's just like
the basic.
Work on the parameters, and don't say it's one of the legends about this is about, well, every golf course is different from each other, so just because you can be successful, I will never be successful. And or it's a special climate in Denmark, that's why you can maintain golf courses without pesticide. I think the story from our little group is like, if you just carry on doing the right greenkeeping on your site, and if you, for example, have the same goal, you will, after very few years, you will end up more or less with the same surfaces. And I don't know if you agree, Michael, you've visited us many times, but they are quite similar with small differences though. But it's not like it's not impossible to copy. You can move this management to a warm season grass, but you don't maintain it as a red fescue, but just do the right stuff, and then I think you will succeed, as it is possible to be successful doing it like this.
Yeah, I think when we move into warmer climates, there's some weeds that I just can't imagine how you can control some of the weeds, but without pesticides, with the information we have now. But then I'm reminded of something that maybe you told me, Martin, or I can't remember which of you told me this, but you said something like, if people don't get challenged, then we never learn something new, and humans are good to actually figure things out, but they need to get challenged first. Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, I do, but it's also like when you're in sort of just a normal businessman. If you're in a particular industry, if you have to move out of your comfort zone, you have to sort of change the competition, you have to sort of invent something new. And if we can always rely on being saved by the fungicides or the herbicides, then we will never have new solutions, and never have new solutions that fits the future of what our politicians and non-golfers and legislators think about golf. So we need to put pressure on ourselves. Sometimes it can be catastrophic. That's not nice. But the pressure itself makes us excel. We become better greenkeepers of being under pressure. We are under pressure enough. We all know that. But it's a way to move forward, and we need new solutions. And that's also one thing I've always, in a selfish way, I've always hoped that, and that's very selfishly, if all golf courses were pesticide-free, imagine how fast we would be at a place where we actually had solutions, viable solutions, sustainable solutions. Because then you pool all this knowledge and resources into solving a new problem.
Yeah, and then you find that, like, yeah, maybe
whatever. You just right now it's just us 7 guys in Denmark who in an experience group, and we're sharing. Imagine if we had all the listeners, viewers here, and other greenkeepers working in the same direction. How fantastic it would be!
It would certainly, in terms of getting new information, things would happen a lot faster. We do have Randy asked a question that I've also been asked when I was sharing information during the tournament week, Thomas, and I was just saying, man, these surfaces are amazing. I can't believe how good this is, pesticide free. And then, I went over and saw Mads, and we took a tour of his course, and it's like, he took me to see his worst green. And I was just kind of laughing when we were at his worst green because it had barely any dollar spot on it. It was just like, it's almost perfect. And there were golfers there, and they were very happy to be playing on that green. And I struggled to distinguish the dollar spot scars from the pitch marks on the green. There were a few pitch marks or a few dollar spot. They basically looked the same. It wasn't a major issue. And when I was sharing the information during that week when I was in Denmark, a couple of people asked me, well, what are they using? Like they must be using some biostimulants, or they must, like, are they using other products as an alternative to fungicides? I think the answer to that is generally no. There's no alternative set of products that are used. But how about some common biostimulants like humic acid or seaweed? I think Randy asked any biostimulants in the program, HA, which I think he means humic acid, or SW, I think he means kelp or seaweed. How much do you guys utilize those kind of products or other biostimulants?
We use a little bit of seaweed. That's it. I think maybe three, 4 application per year, and that's really it. One thing maybe to be said is that in our root zone mix, we have mixed in some very good quality compost. So it's sand and compost, and when we top dress with a sand with a little bit of compost. It's very few percentage, but we add a little bit of compost every time, and that might add up for some of the other product that you could buy. But I think it's quite typical thinking, if you don't have that spray, if you don't have that chemical, what other products can we get to solve the problem? I think that's really the wrong way of thinking. You don't get a product that one-to-one will take over from the pesticide. You will need to think more holistic. You will need to think every little thing, and the timing of what you're doing will be. You need to think more about that instead of thinking of we need a product, or when is that product coming. I don't think product are our future. Of course, some can help. I'm pretty sure of that, but in general, it's more the basic stuff that works for us, at least.
And like at a very big level, that's the right kind of soil condition so that you can grow the right kind of grass with as few major problems as possible. So that the type of grass that you need to be growing has a fighting chance. Instead of like trying to grow bent grass in heavy shade, or like at Royal Copenhagen Greens the first and last greens, which are just, and I've got a video about that, where we were on those greens, and Barton, you described how those greens are the first to get bad in the winter, and they're the last ones to get good to recover in the summer. So essentially you have a much shorter good playing season, a much fewer days in the year with good conditions on those greens because they're in a bad environment. And so you just can't, and in fact, you're deliberately trying to grow different kinds of grass on those greens. Guys, we have a compliment from Germany. Very interesting information, guys. Please, more content like this. I'm so glad to hear that. I find this just absolutely fascinating because it's so outside of the norm. And I'm happy to provide more information like this. So I'm going to Denmark next week. We're going to talk. I've still got video that I recorded in August that I just haven't had time to edit and share. But I think I'll be spurred to do that by the conversations that we'll have in Denmark next week, and some of the information that I'll put together for the presentations that I'm making at the conference, and then also the questions that I'm asked, or the feedback and the commentary that comes back to me as we interact at the conference. So maybe we can even meet again. I know we all have some travel schedules coming up and different time zones and stuff, but maybe we can talk again and share some of this some more, because I feel
now we have solved the IT issues.
Well, now we solved the IT issues for this time at least. Yeah, I mean, that's for people who want more information. There's stuff on my YouTube. There's stuff on my website where I kind of hint at this. I talk about the Tour de Fungus. I've got a playlist about my trip to the Danish Golf Championship with 4 or 5 videos in it now. Hopefully that's going to get extended to 7 or 8. And yeah, this is a conversation that's going to go on for many, many years. And I'm happy to try to facilitate that and to share this information, because I learned so much, and every time I go and I see these courses that aren't treated with pesticides, the conditions are better than I expect. And I just think that's really interesting. And I think if you've never seen it, you're always kind of doubting. And then I'm not saying everybody needs to be pesticide free, but it's like, maybe it's more possible than people give it credit. Maybe it's more possible to use less pesticides and just have better conditions than people might realize. So just like I often recommend, like, why are you putting all that nitrogen? Why are you putting all that sand? Nitrogen makes greens slower. Nitrogen creates thatch. Sand makes greens bumpier and destroys mowers. And there's all these things that we do that we learned in school that might not be right. And I think that this experience group program, the experience group method of collecting data, paying attention to what the conditions are, and then making changes and sharing information of what people learn from their other conversations, and then sharing it in that group, it can really be a powerful tool. So, and also when I've gone on the Tour de Fungus, we see a surprisingly small amount of fungus. When I was there in the summer, I saw a surprisingly small amount of dollar spot on greens that are not treated with fungicide. It's fascinating. So, guys, any more comments or closing remarks? And then I'm going to have to shut this off.
One little closing remark. I think the work that you do, Micah, and thank you for hosting this live meeting, but also other scientists. We will need help. We can't solve it on our own. We need help from like STURF, from USGA and others. Thankfully, with the dollar spot, there are new research projects coming up. There are some running already that shows some very good or some very interesting results and science that we can pick and try and work with and solve it. So I think the research is key and very, very important.
And education like this.
Yeah.
And education like next week that I think Mads, you're one of the committee members who helps to organize the conference.
Mm.
True. I mean, sharing knowledge is a key. You know, if it's an experienced group or if it's the whole country coming together and trying to share knowledge. But I also want to say, of course, pesticide-free. It's for some it's impossible, but still you can. And it's probably not for everybody. But even though you don't have to be pesticide-free, you can also just do less and try to do less and try to maintain your golf course with less. And that will also be a success. I think as a business, not only in Denmark, but worldwide, we have an obligation to do whatever we can and also try to push expectations or limits or whatever it is and do things differently. We do that in other parts of society. Why shouldn't it be on golf courses? Of course, we can do it differently than we used to. And we're going in the right direction. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone who joined us live to listen to this, to watch this, and especially those who participated with some questions and comments. I really appreciate that. It's great to have that to respond to. And big thanks to Thomas and Mads and Martin for joining me live and for putting up with the hassles of this technology. So I'll see you guys in a few days in Denmark, and everybody else, I'll see you around. So thank you, and I'll sign off now for ATC from Chiba, Japan. I'm Michael Woods. Bye-bye.
Right.